A description of the system of Mediterranean warfare of this age and of the character of the vessels employed in it may be found useful, and I subjoin one which I have partly drawn from Finchman's novel history, but chiefly from an admirable paper by Mr. Hulme in his chapters on Turkish history. The names commonly given the vessels of war in the Mediterranean during this century were Galle, Gallon, and Gallas. The two last are names similar to the students of the history of Spanish Armada. They both were applied to vessels of considerable size, and some galleons or galleasses are said to have been from 1,500 to 2,000 tons burden. They had more than one deck, and heavy cannon were used by means of portholes on the lower deck as well as the upper. They were very lofty at both stem and stern. Guns were mounted on the elevated poop and also on the forecastle, a term which then was strictly accurate. These large vessels, which were also called cracks, had one or more tiers of long oars, each worked by several rowers, but they depended principally on their piasts and sails for locomotion. But though large ships of this description were used in force of contending navies consisted, in order to understand this, we must bear in mind of difference between the naval gunnery of those times and our own, and how much less the peril was which small light craft then incurred by exposition themselves to the broadside of those of far superior strength. The galleys with which the sea captains of Venice, Genoa, Barcelona, Carthago, Malta, Algiers, and Constantinople performed their chief exploits during the 15th and 16th centuries were essentially rowboats, and the oars were usually pulled by slaves and prisoners of war. The hull lay what is hull? Hull lay very low and close to the water, extremely sharp built and straight in the run, and of such extraordinary length in proportion to the beam of weight that the Venetian galleys of the largest class, which measured 165 feet from the stem to stern, were only 32 feet in total breadth. The prow was furnished, as of old, with a long and sharp beak, and from this, as well as from the usually black color of the hull, the epithet of grab, literally raven, was popularly applied to these vessels by the Moors. The after part was occupied by an extensive poop or quarterdeck, which was the station of the captain and the soldiers, and which was defended on the quarter by galleries and boarding nettings. From this, a descent of 2 or 3 steps led to a long narrow platform called in French coursier and in Spanish corsia, running to the whole length of vessel from the forecastle to the poop and serving both for a gangway, gangway and a flush deck. On this, the guns were mounted, usually a single long, heavy piece pointed forwards in a groove near the bow, and 2 or 4 others of smaller calibre amidship. The rowing benches to which the galley slaves were usually chained by one foot were arranged. Barbarossa was born in the island of Mytilene. His father, a Sipahi of Rumelia, had settled there when the island was conquered by Mohammed II. Of 4 sons, the eldest Isaac traded as a merchant in Mytilene. The other 3, Elias, Uruj, and Khizr, afterwards called Hayreddin, practiced commerce and piracy conjointly. During the reign of Bayezid II and Selim, Elias fell in a sea fight with the Knight of Rhodos. Uruj was taken prisoner but was released through the influence of Prince Korkut, then governor of Karamania. Uruj and Khaireddin next practiced as bold and fortunate sea rovers under Mohammed, the Sultan of Tunis. They saw, however, the feebleness of the Mohammedan princes of the North African seaports, and they know the strength of the Ottoman Empire, especially under such a ruler as Selim. They paid court therefore to the Sublime Porte by sending one of their richest prizes to Constantinople and received in return two galley and robes of honor. On the sort of sloping gallery or wide gunwale in French pont, which projected over the ship's side, so that those who rode in the highest rank were immediately below the coursier, and under the eye of their taskmasters, who quickened their exertions by the unsparing use to the lash. The galley was pulled with 26 oars on a side, a number which seems to have been nearly invariable in all raids. But the smaller classes, galeres, subtiles, or tegeres called fergata or frigate, and Kirlangic by the Turk. and the Moors, Jaffan and Teliti, but only one or more men in each oar. The largest Galezza of the Venetian and Moana of the Turks had sometimes even as many as 5 or 6. Those of the ordinary rate, galeeres, batardes, whence the Turkish bashtada, which were almost exclusively employed by the Turks, had there. The galley was provided with a main and foremast which might be raised or struck the required and which earth large in lateen sails, but a craft of the construction just described could only have been trusted on the sail in light winds and smooth seas as her wont to heal, and deficiency is beam must have made her at all times a bad sea-boat, while her great length must have exposed her to break her back, and founder in a rough sea. But these disadvantages were compensated by the swiftness with which vessels so navigated could be impelled, like the steamboats of modern days, over the smooth summer seas of the Mediterranean by the facility with which they penetrated into creeks, rivers, and inlets which the intricacy or shallowness of their waters rendered impervious to vessels of draught, and depending only on sails, with their masts lowered and their long low hulls undiscernible on the surface of the sea by the sentinels on shore. The cross-air galley lay during the day unsuspected in the offing, opposite to a town which they had marked for plunder. At midnight the inhabitants were roused by the flames of their dwellings and the fierce cry to the takbir, booty, and such of their captives as had been spared from the slaughter long ere the ineffectual aid of the neighboring garrisons could reach the scene of the devastation. They now made themselves masters of some small towns on the African coast, and being joined by their brother Isaac the merchant of Mytilene, they increased their squadron and succeeded in taking possession by force or by stratagem of Tennis and Telmessa, and also of the strong city of Algiers. Isaac and Uruj soon after this fell in the battle with the Spaniards, and Khayreddin was left sole master of their conquests. He formerly recognized the sovereignty of the Turkish Sultan and received from Selim the regular insignia of office, a saber, a horse, and a banner as Beylerbey of Algiers. Khayrettin carried on active war against the Spaniards and the independent Arab tribes of North Africa. He took from the Spaniards the little island in the front of the port of Algiers, which had for 14 years been in their occupation, and he defeated and captured a Spanish squadron which was sent to succor the garrison. Acting steadily up to his policy of professing allegiance to the Sublime Porte, Barbarossa sent regular reports of his operations to Constantinople and desisted in obedience to orders received thence from attacking the ship or coast of France, when that country became connected by the treaty with Turkey. The red-bearded sea king of Algiers was now required by Sultan Suleiman to measure himself with a formidable opponent in the Genoese Doria, Charles V's favorite admiral. But Barossa repulsed Doria's attack on the island of the Gerber, and then, joining his galleys with those of the Crosshair Sinan, he sailed the Triumph along the Genoese coast, which he swept with fire and devastation. He next conveyed 70,000 of the persecuted Moors of Spain from Andalusia to strengthen his own Algerine dominions. In the meanwhile, Doria had captured from the Turks the city of Coron and Morea, and Soliman, who recognized the Barbarossa, the only Mahometan admiral that could compete with the Genoese hero, sent for Khayreddin to Constantinople to consult with him as the best mode of carrying on the war by sea against the Spaniards. Khayreddin set sail from Algiers 1533 in obedience to his Padishah's commands, with 18 vessels, 5 of which belonged to pirates who had volunteered into the Sultan's service, and he captured on the voyage 2 of Doria's galleys. He was received by the Sublime Porte with the highest honors, and under his personal direction the arsenals of Constantinople were busy throughout that winter with the equipment of the powerful fleet of 84 vessels, including the Algerine squadron with which Barbarossa sailed for Italy in the spring of 1534 while Suleiman was commencing his campaign against Persia. Barbarossa, now Khayreddin Pasha, sacked Reggio, Citaro, Sperlonga, and Fondi. His attack, that's enough.